I should slow it down, take it easy. I just keep on staring at my phone. Yeah, my head's spinning, heart's racing, knowing that you could give me a call. I lay awake at night because all I seem to think about is you. Fuck, I don't know what to do. Do I want this too much? I know I have burned you once before. You can chew me up and spit me out if you don't wanna see me anymore. But I just wanna try it because all that I can think about is you. And I don't know what to do. Can I stay for a while? Cause I don't know any better. I should say something clever, but I can't think whatsoever. Because my logic's out the window when I'm sitting next to you. Go ahead and break my heart if you want to, but I'll stay for a while if that's okay with you. Am I a crazy person, maniac? Cause I just wanna jump right in with you. And I don't care about the consequences. I think you know that too. Just give me one more try, and I promise I will never let you down. Cause you're all that I see now. Can I stay for a while? Cause I don't know any better. Yeah. I should say something clever, but I can't think whatsoever. Because my logic's out the window when I'm sitting next to you. Go ahead and break my heart if you want to, but I'll stay for a while if that's okay with you. 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 I should slow it down, take it easy. I just keep on staring at my phone. Yeah, my head's spinning, heart's racing, knowing that you could give me a call. I lay awake at night because all I seem to think about is you. Can I stay for a while? Cause I don't know any better. I should say something clever, but I can't think whatsoever. Because my logic's out the window when I'm sitting next to you. Go ahead and break my heart if you want to, but I'll stay for a while if that's okay with you.
The talk today, as you can see, the fishy tale of old forelecks. All will become clear eventually. But the idea for this talk came to me while we were on a road trip going down past Alloway North, East London, Port Elizabeth, Cape Town, and along Route 62, and we called in East London, at the East London Museum. Of course, East London is famous for the story that I'm going to tell you. But the idea also then came to me a long time ago, when I was a third-year university student studying zoology at Rhodes University. One Monday afternoon, after lunch, we were all in our white coats, heading for the laboratory in the zoology department, where we would then chop up monkeys and snakes and rats and things. Always happened, thank goodness, after lunch. Heaven knows what would have happened before lunch. We wouldn't have eaten our lunch. But anyhow, that's another story. So we get there, and there were only, I think there were 9 of us who were majoring in zoology. And in walked, now we're all standing at our places, and in walked Professor Allinson, shock of grey hair, spotless white coat, sleeves, collar, at least cuffs all out. Students, my students, good afternoon. I'll always remember him as that kind of person, lovely person. He said, "Follow me." What? Here we were expecting to be sitting, chopping up rats and things for the whole afternoon. Anyhow, we all got up and we followed him. And at Rhodes University in those days was a little corrugated iron kind of, not little, but building. And if you know Rhodes University, it's beautiful buildings and so on. But there was this corrugated iron sort of shed-like thing. And it was the ichthyology department where they studied fish, right? And who was director but Mrs. Margaret Smith? You'll hear about her later on. So we walked in there, and there she was, and there was this huge big tub, I'd say about that big, that deep. And she said, "Afternoon." And we said, "Afternoon, ma'am." And we stood there, and Mike Bruton, who you'll hear about later as well, and myself were together there, standing there, and she said, "Hey, you two, pick up this fish." Well, we looked down, and there was this tub of formalin with this grey-looking mass inside. And now we had white coats, and our lab coats and so on. So we went down and we picked the fish up. I had the tail and Mike had the head. And we stood there with formalin dripping down and so on. And Margaret proceeded to lecture us on the coelacanth. Well, we stood there while she prodded and pulled and everybody crowded around and so on. Now this fish is that long and it's that wide, and it was quite heavy. So, eventually we were sort of staggering under the weight. What a fascinating afternoon. We were told all sorts of interesting things. Eventually, the fish landed up back in the formalin, and we went home, changed, got all this, and we stank of formalin for the whole afternoon. And so that engendered an interest in this amazing fish. Okay, so that's why we are now going to have a look at the discovery of the coelacanth. Right. But before we start, I need to just mention one thing. Do you all know what a fossil is, apart from me? A fossil is an animal or plant that has died a couple of million years ago and has been preserved in mud and stuff. So people go along and they go chipping out fossils. and they then can identify organisms, plants, animals, and so on, that have survived on the planet millions upon millions of years ago. That's what a fossil is. In fact, you can find fossils in the dongas around Escort, dicynodon fossils. Dave Green, some of you might remember him, took us one day out towards the dam, and we dug up dicynodon fossils. Now, I mentioned fossil because fossils give us an indication of the presence of animals and plants that existed a long time ago. Right, onwards with the story. Now, you're looking at the world as it was 270 million years ago. That's a long time. It's not just yesterday. It's a heck of a long time ago. And what you're looking at is what is called Pangaea. The continents were sort of melded together. And eventually they drifted apart to form what we have today, all right? But these were the continents together about 270 million years ago. I wonder if you can recognize some of the present day continents. Those of you who did geography, have a look at this one. Do you see there? That might be South America, okay? And then this one here, you should recognize that one because we live about there. That's Africa, all right? India is there, right? And it moved around there. There's the United States, and there's Europe and China and all the others. Now, the reason why I'm showing you this is that 270 million years ago, coelacanths were swimming in the sea around Pangaea. And how do we know that? Well, there are fossilized coelacanth fish. And these fossils are about 240 million years old. They were dug up by paleontologists and dated and so on. So they were in the seas around Pangaea, and these fossils are found in Africa, in South America. They even found them in Antarctica and in Australia. So they were spread around, okay? And these were identified as ancient coelacanths. How do we know this? Well, here's a sort of a fantasy picture of what happened then, what it might have looked like. The coelacanths actually predated the dinosaurs by about 28 million years. So they were there long before the dinosaurs even thought of being around. And here we have a picture of what it might have looked like. These are coelacanths. There's another type of coelacanth. There's an aquatic dinosaur. There's a brontosaurus chewing at tree leaves and so on. And so they existed together. Now you might ask, how do you know they existed together? Well, we know from the fossil record that they existed together next, because this guy, Spinosaurus aegyptiacus, was fossilized, and strangely enough, the fossil had a coelacanth in its stomach. So, how about that? Here we now know that the coelacanth, there's a coelacanth being gobbled up, and there is Spinosaurus aegyptiacus, and in his stomach, or its stomach, was a fossilized coelacanth. So we know that they exist together. Now, a problem. About 65 million years ago, an asteroid 10 kilometers in diameter, that I would say the diameter from here about to Battlefields. You know the restaurant Battlefields, right? Huge, slammed into the earth. There you can see a picture. In the region of the Yucatan Peninsula, now close by Mexico. And it caused what is called the Cretaceous extinction. Can you imagine a 10-kilometer diameter piece of rock slamming into the earth, traveling at about 24,000 kilometers per hour? I mean, it just vaporized everything. And that was the end of the dinosaurs. Now you might say, how could the dinosaurs been driven into extinction by that? Well, when a thing like that slams into the earth, a huge amount of dust goes into the atmosphere, and you have what is called a dust winter. The world cooled down for thousands of years. The plants died, dinosaurs eat plants, dinosaurs eat dinosaurs, and if there are no more dinosaurs to eat, you all die. The dinosaurs became extinct. And they haven't been seen since. Then people never ever found coelacanths living. So it was assumed that when that extinction took place, the coelacanths died as well. The only way we knew that coelacanths were around were by the fossils. So the coelacanth was believed to be extinct. Coelacanth fossils were the only evidence of that fish. Next. And there on the wall at the entrance of the East London Museum is a cast of a coelacanth fossil. Obviously different to the ones that you saw previously, but there were different coelacanths. And then things were about to change. Okay. Things were about to change. And a fortunate stroke of serendipity took place. Do you know what serendipity means? Anybody? Anybody want to tell me what serendipity means? Nobody? Yeah, it means a good, fortunate discovery of something, a good happening, something that, you know, when something serendipitous happens, it's a happy thing that has taken place. Well, that was a fortunate stroke of serendipity. Next. Because on the 23rd of December in 1938, that guy came along. All right. The 23rd of December in 1938 in East London. Now, I don't know if everybody's been to here. I know Ron worked in East London for a long time. He had family there. And it gets hot in East London. And Captain Hendrik Khoisan was skipper of a trawler there called Nareen. Now, these trawlers went out and trawled for fish, all right? Next. Right. Now, they trawled just off the coast of the Eastern Cape, East London being in the Eastern Cape. And on the 23rd of December, Captain Hendrik Khoisan dropped his trawl net off the Chalumna River there. Okay? I can't pronounce that. That's in Khoisan. And it's got those funny clicks and I can never get my tongue around. But the Chalumna River is just south of East London. East London somewhere up there. So, in about 80 meters of water, he dropped this trawl net about there. Okay? Next. There is the Nareen, and there are the ropes, or cables, or whatever they used, going down to the trawl net. Now, the trawl started there, and it trawled for 3 hours around like that. And there was a cold upwelling of water on that day in the sea, all right? So you can imagine what it's going to look like. Next. There is the ship, and there's the trawl net. Now, it's a bottom trawl. In other words, they drop this huge, big, thin net, and it's got a wide opening, and it goes down into a funnel, and anything that is in the way gets caught in it. It can be octopus and sharks and snails and starfish and anything else you want, all right? Because it just drags along the bottom. If you get in the way, you'll end up in the net. Okay, so after 3 hours of trawling around, Captain Khoisan pulled in. Next. Captain Khoisan. Oh, no, that's sorry. Next, onwards. Sorry. that was Captain Ron sitting in a makeup of the thing in the museum, and he was trying to steer the ship. Anyhow, Captain Khoisan pulled in to the East London harbour, emptied this whole thing of fish and stuff, and looked around and saw a bluish kind of fish, which looked very odd. And he went down, and this fish actually snapped at him because it was still alive. Right. Now, here comes the serendipity. This lady, Marjorie Courtney Latimer, was curator of the East London Museum. Now, Marjorie was a fantastic person. She loved nature and anything to do with living things and biology and so on. She was fascinated by all sorts of things, and she collected stuff for the East London Museum. Now, she knew Captain Khoisan because every time he came in, he would give her a call and say, Marjorie, won't you come down to the quay and go and have a look at what we've got? Because, all sorts of things landed up in the net. And she would go down and she would then select specimens for the museum. So, she went down and here she saw this fish. Now by that time, obviously it had died. And she looked at it, and it looked like nothing else she'd ever seen. So she said to Captain Khoisan, I'm going to take this back to the museum. But how do you get a fish back to the museum that's that long, that thick, and so on? Okay. She then phones, or gets hold of, I don't know how they did it that way, perhaps by pigeon or something. She then gets hold of Mr. C.D. Harold, and he had his car, and she put the fish in the boot of his car. And they then went back to the museum. Right. Now, what do you do with an oily fish? It was an oily fish. It was sort of exuding oil and stuff. All right. You know, sort of not motor oil, but clear sort of cooking oil kind of stuff. You know, fish oil. All right. And what do you do with an oily fish 1.3 meters long on a hot December day? Now, you know, she knew this fish was important. So how do you preserve it? You know, and that's 1938. So she's wandering around trying to find a freezer, perhaps ice, perhaps, but it's December. It's just before Christmas. And how does she get it around? So she gets a hand cart and she transports the coelacanth from the museum all around town. Eventually she couldn't find anybody. So she decided, well, the best thing to do is to take it to a taxidermist. And this Mr. Center in Quigney was the taxidermist. Next. So there is the cart. You can imagine Marjorie with this fish on the back, wandering around East London, Quigney, I don't know.
About 5 kilos.
5 kilometers, perhaps, sorry.
Taking it to a mortuary.
Yeah, something like that. Hey, good idea. Why weren't you around? Okay. Eventually, the taxidermist took over. Yeah, you know, that was unfortunate because you've got to take all the insides out. You know, you're destroying evidence, as it were. Here's this thing that nobody knew what it was. Marjorie didn't know what it was. Next. But she was very precise. She makes a sketch of the fish. There it is. All right. She noted that there are bony plates on the head. There are these kind of lobe-like fins and a funny-looking tail. She even says the tail was 12 inches, the depth of the body was 14 inches. I suppose depth means width, eh? And she was very precise. She realizes there's one person in the world who would be able to help her. And who was that person? It was J.L.B. Smith, who was professor of organic chemistry at Rhodes University. But he also was in charge of the ichthyology department. Now, Professor J.L.B. Smith was a very keen ichthyologist. He wrote Sea Fishes of South Africa and a brilliant book. So, Marjorie posts this diagram off to J.L.B. Smith. But J.L.B. Smith is on holiday. Work, guts. And he's in Knysna at his holiday cottage, and the letter goes to Rhodes University. I don't know what the post was like in those days, but 10 days later, he gets the letter. All right. He opens the letter, and he couldn't believe his eyes, because here was something that was supposed to be extinct. He couldn't believe it. Here was a coelacanth that had been caught off the coast of East London. And this is what J.L.B. Smith writes in his book, Old Four Legs, hence the name of the talk. He says, after seeing the sketch, he writes the following: and then a bomb seemed to burst in my brain, and beyond that sketch and the paper of the letter I was looking at, a series of 50 creatures that flashed up as one on a screen. Fishes no longer here. Fishes that had lived in dim past ages gone, and of which only fragmentary remains in rocks are known. So in other words, there were only fossils, and here he was looking at an actual specimen, a drawing of a living specimen. Next. Well, what do? He sends off a telegram to Marjorie in East London, and the telegram asks Marjorie to preserve the skeleton and gills. Too late. Too late. It had been preserved, the outside, the insides were gone. So, anyhow, they still had the fish, all right? But it was very poorly preserved. In other words, you can't blame, somebody who would probably, taxidermist, got a kudu or something and managed to make it look alive and so on. Here you land up with an oily fish, all right? So what happened was, once J.L.B. Smith got to Rhodes University and to East London and looked at the fish that was preserved, he then decided to send it to Cape Town, because there was a very good taxidermist in Cape Town, Mr. James Dury. And he then worked on the fish and cleaned it up and made an accurate cast or whatever. The fish was presented to the South African Museum in Cape Town, and a cast was sent back to Marjorie in East London. By the way, Marjorie Courtney-Latimer didn't want this fish out of her sight. She sat on the train with the fish in her compartment all the way to Cape Town, keep on looking at it, not letting anybody near. She even took it from the station, sat next to it in the taxi that took it to the museum. She was very particular about this fish. Okay. And then the fish arrived in Cape Town. Okay, the cast. And there you can see the actual cast. And there's Marjorie behind the fish. Next. And there is the actual cast in the East London Museum. I don't know if you can see this ghost behind that captain, that we spoke about earlier. Right, next. Here you can see. Now, J.L.B. Smith then had to name the fish because it was unknown. So in honor of Marjorie Courtney-Latimer, he named the fish Latimeria cholumni. Latimeria after Marjorie, and cholumni after the river opposite which it was caught. So Latimeria cholumni was trawled off the Cholumna River in the Eastern Cape, 80 metres deep. The captain of the trawler, Hendrik Khoisan, named in honour of Marjorie Courtney-Latimer, curator of the East London Museum, who saved the specimen for science. This must have been the greatest scientific discovery in the 20th century because it was fantastic. Next. Right, there's the head of the fish, just to show you detail. Next. Okay. Next. Professor Smith then had to write up this discovery, and he writes it in, he sends it off to the journal called Nature, volume 143. It appeared, and there you can see by Dr. J.L.B. Smith of Rhodes University. He describes the whole thing. This hits the scientific world. In fact, it hits the whole world. And Marjorie, JLB, and the fish become world famous. Next. Of course, now the press gets hold of it. Oh, and in those days, the press was everything. Okay? And here you can see in the East London, Cape Argus rather, you can see articles beginning to appear. And next. And it appeared in the Daily Dispatch, next, in the Cape Times. It even appeared in the Hobart, at least the Hobart in Tasmania, in their newspaper. So it was spreading around the world. And what happened then? 1939 came along. And what happened then? The Second World War. That put an end to everything except what was happening in Europe and all around the world. So, at the end of the war, J.L.B. Smith decided if there was one coelacanth, there must be more. Okay? So he sends out flyers to all the area around which he thought the coelacanth might be found. The Comores, Madagascar, the Seychelles, Mauritius, the north coast of Africa. And he posts these, and there you can see a flyer with a picture of the coelacanth in the Comores. Now, this guy, Eric Hunt, who had a ship, not a ship, it was sort of like a sailing ship, a catamaran or whatever it was called, and he was a keen ichthyologist as well. And he wrote back to Smith and he said that he would catch the second coelacanth because he had a vague idea. The people in the Comores had sort of spoken about this strange fish, okay? And they didn't catch many of them, but nobody knew what they were, so they threw them back. They didn't eat them because they were awful. They tasted terrible, so nobody knew about it. But Smith, at least Hunt, had this idea. So, next, he goes around, and what happens? He catches a coelacanth. Right. He then sends a telegram to JLB and says, coelacanth caught off Anjouan Island, come and get it. Now hell, here you're sitting in Grahamstown. The Comores are about, I don't know how many thousands kilometres in the sea, up the coast, there. How do you go and get a coelacanth and bring it back? JLB thinks, government. He goes to Paul Sauer. Some of us might remember him. He was Minister of Transport. Why not go to the Minister of Transport and say, Mr. Minister, there is a fantastic discovery in Anjouan. I need something to bring it back. Minister of Transport looks at him and says, Jy's mal man. Nee, dit gaan nie gebeur nie. All right, failure. Goes to the Minister of Economic Affairs. No ways. Goes to Urban Donges, Minister of Internal Affairs. No ways. How do you get this jolly fish back? Okay, go to the top. So he goes to the Prime Minister, D.F. Malan. Now, D.F. Malan was a keen fisherman. And next to his bed, in his holiday cottage in Plettenberg Bay, was a copy of J.L.B. Smith's Sea Fishes of South Africa. So, you know, why not help a fellow fisherman? I mean, we're government. We can do anything. He did. Next. He commandeers a Dakota. Right. Dakota number 6832. It's still flying today. I think it's based at Snake Valley in Pretoria, somewhere there. It belongs to the Air Force Museum. All right. Okay. J.L.B. Smith gets on the plane together with Margaret Smith, and the captain is Captain Blau, and there's a crew, and they take off for the Comores. Right. The second coelacanth was caught off Anjouan there, just east of Mayotte. Right? So now, they arrive over Anjouan, and J.L. Smith looks down and sees this narrow landing strip and asks Captain Blau, will we be able to land there? And Captain Blau looks and says, no, but we'll land anyway. They landed, and there was Hunt waiting with the second coelacanth. Next. And as he was presented with that, a photo was taken moments after J.L.B. Smith had identified the coelacanth there. There is Hunt, there's J.L.B. Smith, there's the Captain Blau, and there is Monsieur Couder, the governor of the Comores. He almost put a spanner in the works by not allowing the fish to be taken out of the Comores. Well, why not? I mean, this is a famous thing. But J.L.B. managed to persuade him. Off they go to Durban. They then take the fish to Cape Town next, and they show it to the Prime Minister. There is D.F. Malone and the coelacanth. But before that, a journalist had written in a newspaper about this whole thing. And he said, who would send a mad scientist to a foreign country to fetch a dead fish? Well, it happened. Right. D.F. Malone looked at this thing, and J.L.B. Smith explained it to him and so on. And he looked at this thing, and D.F. Malone said, it's so ugly. Yeah, it is ugly. Are we really descended from this? And J.L.B. Smith said to him, I've known uglier people, referring obviously to those ministers who didn't want to help him. Anyhow, there was the second coelacanth, and I believe that coelacanth is in Cape Town. After that, coelacanths became all over the place. People were realizing that they were alive. Next, please. And the first coelacanth, live coelacanth in its own habitat, was photographed by an ichthyologist called Hans Fricker. He built a submersible called Jago that could go down, and they photographed the first live coelacanth. There you can see. People had a strange idea that coelacanths were only found in the great big depths of the sea and so on, but they weren't. They were found in shallow water and so on. So why go and hammer out to sea when you could catch them anywhere. The coelacanth they discovered had these white spots on them. They acted like fingerprints. So when somebody photographed future coelacanths, you could actually say, hey, that coelacanth was there at that time because of the fingerprint. Next. And coelacanths popped up all over the place. Down the east, in the East London area, up the coast, St. Lucia, all the way up Mozambique, Madagascar, right up to Somalia, and then they popped up in Indonesia. So these things were all over the place. Next. Right, but to actually swim with a living coelacanth, and the person who had that privilege was a photographer called Laurent Balesta. He was an underwater photographer, and he wanted to photograph a coelacanth. And there you can see him and the coelacanth. Look at that. He could get right up because they were very docile, friendly fish. They didn't swim away, and So they managed to get beautiful photographs. Now, the coelacanth just took off. Okay, next. And the coelacanth appeared on all sorts of things. On stamps, on first day covers, next. On all sorts of letters and stamps. And here you can see the coelacanth was everywhere, next. It even appeared in Royal Dalton, on plates. Next. And even on menus. This is the Rotary Club of Arcadia, and they had a dinner, and they even put a coelacanth in the background. Why not? And this was an occasion where the state president, F.W. de Klerk, was present, and that was part of the menu. Next. So it went on, and this was an invitation to a do that was going to help preserve the coelacanth, because, people were now going mad about this. The Americans wanted coelacanths for their museums. The Russians wanted them. Even the Chinese, I think they'd eat them. Anyhow, here you can see this invitation, and Marjorie Courtney Latimer, who is now quite elderly, was invited as a special guest. And there you can see Mike Bruton, who became director of the ichthyology department at Rhodes. He is a famous ichthyologist now. He's written numerous books. Next. It even appeared on a bottle of wine. I don't know. It might have been an oily wine. I'm not quite sure. But this is the Robertson wine of origin from the Boer. I don't know what. It's a bit vague. But from, that was wonderful. Next. So, if you go to the East London Museum, please call in at the Coelacanth Gallery. You will be fascinated by all the ins and outs and goings on of this amazing fish that we have in the museum. And thank you for listening to this rather strange story. And let's hope that the coelacanth will survive for another couple of million years. Thank you very much.